Hey there, Ddraig here, and we're back with another unit guide on the OS Factions mod by Shaky Brothers. Today we're going to be checking out Araby, a faction which has just had a graphical upgrade, so I thought I'll wait till that has been completed before we go into look into these units. Also, Creative Assembly have stated they have no plans on bringing this faction to the game. Well, currently anyway. So without any further ado, let's head straight into the roster, as this is the largest roster in the OS Factions mod. So we definitely need a good beverage review. Everything you see is on ultra settings, so let's get started with the Hordes. Just an extra note before I go straight to the roster. I'm currently got a vote up on my community part of my channel, voting for my first campaign, which will be of course modded. There's a couple of options there, so check it out if you haven't voted yet. First up, of the three-edged Hordes, we have Sultan Jafar, a mighty sorcerer who managed to unite Araby and ruled as the Sultan for 15 years. Before being defeated by the armies of King Yuri, the Righteous at the Battle of Al-Haik, a battle where the Sultan actually died. So what does our first choice of edged Horde do? Well, in combat he's below average. While he has okay stats, against any combat Horde he will struggle, but he will dish out some damage to the standard units of the Warhammer world. He's pretty much a bit better than your average caster. He does have some nice AP at 260 and a bonus of charge of 25. Certainly a bonus to say the least. He does possess weak armour, so it's definitely one to keep away from the main fight. Now as mentioned, he's a sorcerer, so he provides some nice spells to Toccat. First of them are the Spirit Yeach, do break darkness. Then we've got Infantry and a Pendium. And two more from a new Euro exclusive to Araby, Mirage and Sandstorm. But we should talk about them when we get to the caster. A few abilities now. Will of Jafar gives out a nice constant leadership buff and immune to psychology and a very large radius of 55 meters. Then we move on to the Black Book of Nagazar, a very powerful object which creates lots of winds of magic, but hurts Jafar or he can push it onto someone else, as long as they're allies. But can only be used 3 times, so just be a bit careful about it. Unless it's on Spaves, and then who cares. Lastly, an item, the Serpent Staff, providing a great wind spell if it's only a one-time use object. For an added bonus, he can also be mounted on a camel or an elephant, which we shall go back to later. As you can see, this provides a ranged shot, as well as being a very large angry elephant, adding 370 AP damage and anti-infantry bonus of 34, making Jafar a truly potent battlefield unit. A ranged and combat horde this time with a mighty Fantanderia. Coming from peddlers and entertainers, she and her twin brother travelled with her family, and at one village, the family were accused of stealing. As they were making ready to leave, they were attacked, and the family was killed. She, however, managed to escape. She swore vengeance, and trained with an expert to seek out this vengeance, and she eventually killed the entire village. From there, she gathered mercenaries and set about making a name for herself. A skilled combatant in ranged and in close with Mie, she is a formidable warrior. High stats in attack and defense. While the damage is not great, at 180p and 25 anti-infantry, she does possess a powerful ranged attack, which has 200 AP and 110 anti-charge, so definitely can deal with the damage out. A true hybrid Horde, which can be no doubt tailored to be more Mie combative or more favoured ranged attacks. Abilities wise, you can choose Desert Feint, making her the expert assassin by increasing her speed and turning her nearly invisible. Then she can launch a potent aimed shot at a target, causing huge damage, but it's limited to only 2 shots. Finally, she has her braids, increasing her own damage, be it with a bow or when she's in the thick of the fight. Mount options, she has a warhorse or a desert rock called Sequara, increasing her speed, but still keeps decent melee attack and of course that damage, while the bird is potent. However, hasn't got much AP at only 176, but it does hit like a truck on the charge, and she still retains the bow, so becoming a very mobile force. Additionally, she has access to some of the Tomb King's units, such as Nakara Warriors, the Tomb Guard, the Chariots, the Shapti, and the Nakapopus Knights. The last of the Horde we did check out is the Golden Maginus, a powerful wizard of tremendous power and a man of exotic taste. rich beyond measure and the self-styled Sultan of the Seas. He is surrounded in mystery. He is claimed to be a merchant priest, an exile, the patriarch of the colleges of magic, and the gilded king of Kofa Reborn. He's more towards a magician than can be used in combat. He's weaker than the Sultan Jafar. He does have a magical fire attack, but other than that, it's his magic where his power comes from. With choices from Harmonic Convergence, Uranian Thunderbolt, the Burning Head, and Flamestorm. Also having Tidecore and Denizens of the Deep, which means he can summon some rotten Prometheans as well. Naturally, this gives him a wide selection of buffs, such as while casting, such as Kindle Flame, Roaring Skies, and Kiss of Deep. He provides a very detailed and spell book. Other abilities include an ability to summon a powerful genie to the battlefield, and more on them later. You can also wield a flaming scimitar, boosting damage and imbuing magic and fire damage as well. And this affects either ranged or melee. With a large 200 meter radius, this is a very valuable ability, especially at 22 seconds in the nth, and can be used every 44 seconds. As a negative to all the power he wields, if he drops below 50% health, his miscount chance is increased by 50%, so be aware that needs to be looked after. So maybe he should be put on a mount, such as a camel, or even more interestingly, the barge which is shown here. Adding a ranged attack as well adds more protection to the Golden Maginus. Give him some combat potency at 250 AP and some bonus to infantry of 25. He also now has a ranged attack from his servants on the barge itself. If that's not enough, while on the barge he has some extra abilities. Mistral, increasing the damage resistance around the barge to friendly units, and Sirocco, damaging his enemies nearby as well. A very potent mount in this game. As another note, the Magnus has access to some Promethean hatchlings, which are similar to the rotten Prometheans found on the Vampire Coast. Now onto the more standard Yords, and here is the first option, the Arabian Sheik. Your standard combat Yord, but a damn good one, with a great melee attack and solid defense backed up by the shield and the armour as well. Damage is decent, but only 140 AP, and no other bonuses. But he is a solid choice, and certainly holds his own in combat. He does have various mount options, such as the Arabian Warhorse, Griffin, and the Elephant. Even more expensive than your standard warrior is the wizard version. He's just as potent in combat as the warrior, but he has exclusive Yore of Magic to fall back on. As his stats are identical, let's look at the spells. In the campaign, which I shall go over in more detail in the next video, you can customise your Sheik to either warrior or caster, or a hybrid, but for this video I have split them up. The first one to look at it is when the wizard is casting, he imbues magic damage map wide. This may be on briefly, but can add a little extra bit of damage to your units during that time. Now onto the spell list. First up is Mirage, creating a usually target to distract the enemy with a unit of spearmen. Very handy to maybe distract a unit of cavalry or large charge of a monster. Next we have Sunstrike, a standard magic missile spell with 200 meter distance, but the projectiles can go much further. Sandstorm is next, and it's pretty much what you expect, a vortex spell going randomly around causing a lot of damage with its magical attacks. Next is the really cool ability, Quicksand, a classic free spell but duration is 38 seconds, which is one of the longest you will find, but costs a lot of runes of magic to use at 13. A short range breath spell now with Burning Hands. Seeing it have to be very close to the enemy, be careful when you use it, as it can leave you vulnerable to being sniped by a powerful hero or Yord. Lastly, the only curse in the spellbook, dropping armour on one enemy, a good spell but if you need to weaken heavily armoured units, making it a bit easier for your troops to finish them off. Lastly, we have a range of items, all these are available to each of the sheiks mentioned just now. It's pretty much based on how you use the skill tree. First up is the Rattlesnake Staff, adding a large pool of winds of magic and enabling magical attacks. Then for a more warrior build, you can wield the Falcon Scimitar, adding increased damage to the attacks and some needed AP damage as well. And of course it turns your attacks into magical. With some public order buffs and leadership gives this a very useful weapon to a warrior. Next is another magical item adding some resistances and more chaos corruption to the region. And lastly, some armour, adding a bit more toughness to a Yord when you want to get him into the fight. Onto the heroes now, and first up is the Nomad, a decent all-round hybrid specialist, with decent values across the entire card. While Nomad does not shine, you can use a skill tree to focus the Nomad on a more ranged or close combat specialist. However, they do lack armour, so be aware of that fact. With only 110 AP on his melee weapon and 85 on his ranged, means they obviously struggle against heavily armoured troops. Abilities: he has the interesting Strike from Shadows, giving him some impressive abilities to pick off his targets while being almost invisible. From here we have different mount options. You can ride a camel, or ride a camel and use a Giselle weapon. This is clearly the most interesting choice, and as it really adds a lot of possibilities to his damage. While the camel is not a quick mount, it does add some great mobility, and while I'm dubious about how stable a camel is when you're trying to shoot this weapon, on the move you can actually do it. With a nice increase in damage of 140 AP and a bonus to the charge of 18. Naturally, it is his ranged weapon that shines, with 333 AP damage on that attack. However, the Nomad does not have the ability to go into Strike from Shadows. Apparently, a camel is really not that sneaky. Lastly, the Nomad can be changed to Hashashi, which adds a lot more damage potential. Makes him a skilled sniper with a poison attack and 210 AP damage. Now with Stalk and still a Strike from Shadows still available. He can cast Doppelganger of himself to distract the enemy, and then uses the Assassin's Trophy to weaken the order hero he has targeted and allow for that easy kill. Now to a more standard combat hero with solid stats all around but nothing exceptional, and a noticeable lack of AP damage at 132. He is armoured with a shield, so has a bit more protecting himself, but he will use against the other faction heroes, but at least put some damage on them at the very minimum. He can also be mounted on a warhorse or the mighty elephant, which I will be obviously going over later when we get to the monsters and beasts. Onto the ranged casters now, and there are 4 types to choose from: Life, Fire, Heavens and the Ore, which we mentioned previously. As you can see from this example, they are basic combatants to say the least, and are all focused on their magic. They do have 2 mount choices however. The first is the classic Flying Carbate, adding a lot of mobility to your caster, but he's still very weak in combat. If he gets caught by another flying monster, he's going to be in for a bad day. The other mount adds the possibility of summoning a Djinn, and adds a lot more health to your magician, as there are 2 slaves holding the magical vessel. A one-off cast that can summon the Djinn of the caster you're using. Onto the infantry section now, and first up, the Shaka's Slaves, an expandable unit of terrible infantry but silly cheap at 115. They are better than peasants and scheming slaves, but are still pretty terrible, but at least their base melee attack is 10 more than those mentioned, and the damage is close to 28. But as you can see, the leadership is almost non-existent and the model count is much lower, so don't expect too much. Next up we have the more normal militia of Araby, the Spearmen. Strong in defence for base units at 300 points. They're also shielded, and they can provide a more solid defensive role, but again they needed support, as leadership is only just over 50. They do have a bonus to the charge of 16, but the AP is only 6. So against heavily armoured targets, they will find it tough going. A useful unit, as all Spearmen in the front line are, or they can be of course used as flank defenders. Onto the sword wielding variant now, the Araby Warriors, providing more balanced attack and defence, and give out a bit more damage back due to the high melee attack. They're still shielded as well, but both these units have low armour and suffer lack of AP damage. This unit is especially so as it only has 7. They're okay for their 235 cost, but with a nice solid defence of the previous units might be more beneficial to you, and of course they are cheaper. Onto a more damage dealing unit now, the Corsairs. With their dual swords, they can put in a bit of extra punch, and with a Vanguard as well, they can be used for some more funky manoeuvres. With 6 for AP and a bonus to infantry, means they're ideal for getting rid of chaff units, but above anything lower tier, they'll definitely be a waste of the 450 cost. a step up in price this time, as these cost 725. But Jaguar champions are more heavily armoured and possess a silver shield, so great at absorbing ranged shots, especially with a 5% missile resistance. They are more of your mid-tier unit and can put down a bit of damage down as well, with the base leadership is very good at 77. However, they still yak AP at only 8, so again, pick your targets well. They do have the Bloodhound ability, which you will see consistently over the rest of this roster. It drops leadership by 4. It's not a massive drain breaking ability, but certainly helps as it's a constant debuff on whoever you're fighting. The first real AP unit now, these tough warriors who own their skills in the fighting pits are a scary threat on the battlefield, with 26 AP damage and a bonus to infantry of 9. They can really start cutting into the armoured units or just removing threats as needed. They're a bit slower than your standard troops, but do come with a death blow, increasing the damage when they're low on health, all for 725 points again. Another AP unit now at 750 points. This however is unbreakable and provides a nice bit of damage at 23 and a nice anti-infantry bonus at 10. And seeing that they are unbreakable, they can also add their frenzy damage here as well. Means this unit can cut apart the enemy in most armies. It's a very handy one and one of my favourite early units to look at. As an unbreakable greatsword unit, should never be taken lightly, as they can do a lot of damage before they finally die. A more anti-air threat now, and a heavily armoured infantry. At nearly 100 and silver shield with a huge defense to boost as well. These are definition of an anchor point of your front line, or unit to protect your viable ranged weapons or casters. At 775, they are a bit more expensive, but they do provide a lot for their cost, with 20 AP damage and 23 anti-arge. This unit can easily make their money back, as they are difficult to remove. This unit should be focused on any large threats which you're facing, as this is where it shines. It is wasted against normal infantry. As the arch units focus more on the anti-arge threat, this unit can focus on the anti-infantry threat. They are a great shock troop, and they can charge in, they do a lot of damage, and then just get them to retreat, as they're not heavily armoured. With only 13 AP and a bonus infantry of 5, they will not cut through elite troops, but they will tear through mid-tier units and of course chaff. Especially if you back this unit up to someone else who can absorb the damage. I'd rarely take this unit on 1v1 unless it's a really low tier unit. And where they can deal with chaff, it might be wasting the damage potential using it on them. Our first regiment of renown at 1000 points. This is a pretty impressive unit, with the highest melee attack so far, decent armour and their silver shield. They are unbreakable and possess the blood howl of the Ddraig champions, and they have death blow as well, meaning they bring a lot to the table. While the damage is not spectacular with only 8 AP, they can be a consistent hit the target threat, and they will not be going anywhere, so you can rely on them to cause a fair bit of damage, and have eased a bit of survivability due to their high armour and a ward save of 10%. Onto the missile units now, and I will be covering both the foot and the mounted versions in this section. So first up are the foot, and we'll start with the Arabian Bowman. Pretty much what you expect from a standard unit of cheap archers at 425. The range is decent at 160 mark and have reasonable damage with 3 AP. Pretty much exactly what you expect from this unit when they're in combat, but do allow some nice missile backup and a great way of helping clearing out the OE chaff. The Nomads are at 625 points mid-tier ranged unit. They have Vanguard and Stalk and adds a bit more damage. 15 of that is AP, so they can really put a hurt down on some of the actual more heavily armoured units. And as an added bonus, they're not exactly horrible in close combat. This is still not an ideal place for them to be, but at least they can hold their own a bit against the weaker or lower tier units. Coming in at a hefty 1105 points, this unit of Jazeels speaks for itself on how useful it is. They are expert at taking out your infantry or hero sniping from that 275 range, with the ability to come in and vanguard and also have Stalk as well, meaning they're very hard to deal with. While they will not put a withering amount of firepower down, as they have a 17-second reload time, they do in accuracy and a huge punch on their weapons, blasting through shields as well. A very valuable unit in your roster, and one the enemy must cater for or be sniped to high heaven. We also have the foot missile units. We have this very expensive Regiment of Renown at 1550 points. These reserves provide even more firepower and they also brine the enemy. With the ever more AP and a slightly quicker reloading time, this unit is ideal for taking out the enemy of the art of heroes or such like the undead factions who rely on these units to keep the army from disintegrating. This unit can pick them off at its leisure, so hide them well and definitely back it up as there's a lot of points to waste. Onto the mountain missile cavalry now, and this is a great cheap option to start with, at only 500 points. The high mobile force allow you to pick off lightly armoured units or use them to run down routing units instead. A valuable cheap resource, especially good early in the campaign. For slightly more points, you can put your archers on Araby's favourite friend, the camel. This unit's a lot tougher, but the speed is nowhere near as good, and personally I favour the more traditional horse version, because I value that speed that they provide. They are, however, just a bit tougher and get more about them, but the speed is what I find difficult to resist from the scouts. However, this unit is definitely worth the money, and it's a yacht at 1475 points. We are getting a mobile sniping force which can fire, and how you can call a camel stable enough on the move to fire a sniper rifle is beyond me, but it is very awesome. It is such a unique option, it allows you to keep your unit moving away from trouble. However, the camels are slow, so any cavalry can catch them, and if they do, they are definitely dead. With only 40 models, you need to keep your distance, and definitely keep the units in your ranks, so they're not easily picked off from the flanks. As if you try to make a flanking move with these, more than likely you get unstuck, and a fast unit of cavalry, and pretty much any cavalry can take these down with ease. So use that range and keep it tight to your good units to protect them. They also have the Bloodhound ability, not a huge use for this particular unit. Onto the cavalry now, and of course we have to start with more camels. While they are slow and ponderous creatures, they are very cheap at 450 points. With a shield and some armour as well, they do possess anti-charge of 15, so they can be used as a nice screen for your vanguard, or just add a bit more punch when fighting monsters. And they are so cheap, any damage is a bonus. And of course they also have that Bloodhound as well. The super lightning quick scout cavalry are worth their 490 points due to that 92 speed. As I mentioned before, I value speed a lot, and this unit can make quick charges and escape before any mid-tier or high-tier cavalry can catch them. Again, they possess vanguard, so you can use them to find out where the enemy is and then escape. Sadly, as cool as the camels are, I do prefer these for such utility, and they're only an extra 40 points. But definitely don't discount those camels. The anti-charge bonus at that cost is very nice. Better in every possible way than the previous unit, and they still have that high speed, making them a great quick shot cavalry, especially as they're pretty heavy armoured at 70, and possess a shield as well, so they won't just disappear if you forget about them in combat. But they will easily get ground down by pretty much all types of cav, so never yinger and get them out and get the most out of that 800 cost. This very tough unit of cav is one of the most heavily armoured in the game at 130, coming in at 950 points. Shielders as well, but not too bad in defence and are great for locking up a unit of cavalry or elite infantry, as their stats really slow down the enemy. And as you may have noticed, none of the units have good AP. And sadly that's the same of all the cavalry, even this Regiment of Renown which we should look at next. This unit may be not the hardest hitting, but it can be a thorn in their enemy's side as they are difficult to shift. This famous cavalry from Araby brings a huge charge and a nice solid damage if not terribly high. Good armour at 80, and of course they are shielded. They have solid melee defence and attack, and it's a great unit at 1150 cost. I would say it brings decent value, as they can provide some extra punch on the charge, just keep them moving. The arse of the cavalry now, and this is a Regiment of Renown heavy cavalry at 1425 points. They have a lot going for this unit. With that massive defence, they are brilliant at absorbing damage, like no other unit can, and I will just keep fighting away. Only the hardest hitting units with a lot of AP will be able to break through this unit's armour. And if you need to lock down a unit, this is the one for you. It is expensive though, and they may need some help to kill something, as the damage is not exceptional. However, we can talk about the damage now, as we bring on the monsters. So here we are, the beasts and monsters, and we start off with a unit which is neither of these things, but it's still damn useful. Only 16 models and a nice range attack as well, which is of course magical, and the Arabian flying carpets make some serious speed. This unit should be used to pick on the elite units or heroes of the enemy, as they only have a limited amount of shots and they only have a low model count as well, so they can't put a lot of damage down. Being able to fire and move, and they're not awful in combat either, with strong stats if your weapon strength, but the charge makes up for that. It's a brilliant unit and at only 850 points, and you can really make a case it's one of the best value for money ones in the roster. The only main weakness is the lack of mod count, so make sure you pick your fights well. This is an excellent damage dealing monster, if a tad unpredictable, with fire and magic on its attack, meaning AP is not really an issue, but for sake of completion it's 155. Faster as well at 85, but that does mean it's quite vulnerable to be picked off by other flying units, as they're a lot quicker than this, and they are a bit flimsy. And while they're unbreakable, they tend to rampage at the moment's notice. That means their fire blow ability is knocked out, so make sure you take advantage of that. At 875 points, they're a decent price, and can certainly worry a lot of heroes with their charge and damage. Just don't rely on them. A familiar unit to anyone who has watched some of my other videos from the OS Factions mod. The Ogres are back, bringing their strength to the fight at 975 points. You get 50 AP and a bonus to infantry of 10, and on a charge they can be a real pain. Great to send in a couple of these units to disrupt the formation and then send a second wave in. They are, however, not great in leadership, but definitely deal some damage as well, with that death blow ability. Next we have the Scorpion units. The first one has a model count of 4. Coming in at 1000 points, this unit provides a real threat to the enemy, with a great AP at 110 and 88 Infantry bonus. And of course they bring that poison attack. They're not the quickest monsters in the world, at 50, but at least no infantry can really outrun them. Their combat stats are okay, but they do suffer from weak defense and leadership. But they're a solid vanguard option, and can be an issue to deal with, being at 4 yard scorpions in the back ranks. It's never a nice feeling. Speaking of large scorpions, the largest scorpion you can find is a Behemoth scorpion, at the same 1000 cost. This unit is great for attacking infantry with that huge damage of 250 and a bonus to infantry of 12. It can really tear through a unit. Naturally it can also feast on a hero or yard as well, but look out for anti-large threats, as if surrounded by them. Even with its tough armour it will probably go down. But 1v1, applying its poisons, it can definitely hold its own, as long as that leadership stays up. Well, we are in Araby, so of course they have genies. A powerful magical creature who, being ethereal, is a real nuisance for the enemy. A large single monster with a magical attack, good damage and okay combat stats, but nothing spectacular. They do have good leadership, and of course some bound spells as well, which do not take up some winds of magic. They have 4 uses of a fireball, 1 use of a chain lightning, and 3 uses of sandstorm, providing you with some interesting options for magic. At 1300 points, doesn't really break the bank. And of course you can always throw it into combat and get it to do some damage as well. Just avoid those magical attacks. Next up we have a giant, and you know what to expect from this big boy, as they're the same as other giants in the game. They pretty much destroy whatever they hit. Before we go into the artillery, let's deal with the more expensive beasts, starting off with the 1600, which is a unit of elephants. Having 4, charging through the ranks of the enemy, you can cause a lot of damage, and with that sledgehammer of a charge, 100 AP and 34 anti-infantry, means they can't really miss their targets. They're not the quickest, but the sheer mass on the charge means they're going to destroy whatever they hit. However, they are prone to rampage. If you want an even bigger elephant, let's try the War Elephant at 1800 points. A much more terrifying beast with even more damage, and equally terrifying attack at 378 AP and 34 bonus to infantry. It also possesses some ranged firepower on its back as well, allowing it to mess up the enemy in so many different levels. Like before, the OG ship can be an issue, but East does not rampage. Said to rival the power of the Norse mammoths, or even more scarier, this elephant should be rightly feared. A regiment renown, which still possesses all the abilities of the previous one, just racked up a few times. And at 2000 points, it's only a small bit more expensive than the 1800 points of the previous unit. Query the Arabian people are a little bit insane, and decided to make another regiment of renown war elephant. And this time, just had a bit more scary prospect, they decided to shove a cannon in its back. How they persuaded the elephant to keep calm, with a cannon being launched, is anyone's guess. And unsurprisingly, this elephant can rampage. But at 2100 points, this possesses a lot of damage possibilities. From its artillery, ranged attack, or of course, close and in up front with its huge mass. Now onto the artillery, starting with your basic bolt thrower at 575 points. A decent cheap anti-yarge threat with some good AP to boot at 116 and a bonus to yarge of 30. A very useful option to have, and the back allowing you to pick off any ranged yarge targets. Naturally, they should be focused on the units which are on their own, but why not have a puppet cavalry as well. Moving on to the catapult now at 650 points. While it's not the most damaging artillery, it's great for clearing chaff and the old tier units which are not heavily armoured. Or you can always try to focus down some elite units. They're inaccurate to be able to pick off any monsters or cavalry, and this is very slow moving. So make sure you don't waste the shots and choose a bunched up threat so this unit can clear the way. Now for a really large cannon. With a solid range and a lot of damage, this cannon, as you can see, is just one model with an army of slaves. 650 AP damage and a bonus to yarge of 50 means it's not going to like you to miss, because it takes 20 seconds to actually load this mighty cannon. Ideal for trying to pick off the very large threats, such as Tomb King constructs. Also drops leadership at 8, so it can be used against infantry or anything you just don't like the look of. And at 750 points, it's a pretty reasonable price. How many times you can actually shoot this before the enemy jumps onto it is a different matter. So make sure you got at least a few units just to keep it active and shooting as long as possible. The Arse is a regiment renowned version of the Bombard. It's everything turned up a notch with a magical attack this time and frenzy, so it does even more damage. And it's only 100 more, so you can put it in any army which you need that devastating anti-yarge threat. Perfect for when you're rolling against the Tomb Kings. Thanks for watching this video. Hopefully it hasn't gone on too long, but that's a big roster to get through. Just a quick reminder, I've got my campaign starting on Monday. This will probably come out on Sunday at some point, so you got a bit of chance to cast your vote if you want to. However, until then, and until my next video on Araby, which will of course be covering the campaign, I'll see you next time.